It's finally time. The Overwatch League is 1 week away. The long wait is finally over. In a year that could make or break this league, I think I can speak for most when I say that this should be quite the exciting year. And it goes just beyond the future of the league, right? In general, this season is going to be very fun to watch. You have homestands every weekend and multiple teams who have changed greatly. It's a brand new year and anything can happen. To celebrate the start of Overwatch League Season 3, it's time to reveal my annual preseason power rankings. Before getting started, I should probably make a few things clear. First off, this is all strictly my opinion. Like many other content creators out there, there are probably going to be some things I say that you disagree with, and that's okay. I encourage healthy debate both here on my channel and in this community in general. With that said though, if you disagree with something, please be respectful. Nobody likes a jerk who openly insults somebody for having a different opinion from theirs. And second, these rankings were made with the newly announced hero pools being a factor. Okay, now that I've gotten that out of the way, let's begin. Number 20, the Boston Uprising. Okay, so Boston is a team that is always difficult to judge. They usually find ways to surpass expectations, both in the positive and negative aspect. With that said, this is one I totally see myself being wrong about potentially as the season unfolds. However, as it currently stands, Boston, in my opinion, has the weakest team on paper. From top to bottom, the players on this roster are either unproven or average at best. There are pieces on this team I like, such as Fusions for his leadership and the newly acquired flex support Myungbong from O2 Blast, but it's just not enough for me to think of them as anything more than league bottom feeders. The only place this team at least kind of stands out for me is the support line, but unfortunately, neither of them are proven at a tier 1 level right now, so whether or not they are any good is very much up in the air. Boston is just also known for having inner turmoil within their org. I guess this year could be different, but I just wouldn't count on it. Losing a ton can really affect a team's mindset, and who knows if another player of theirs causes problems internally. If this team even wanted to be halfway decent, then a lot of things need to go their way, and luck tends to not be on this org side. Sorry Boston fans, but I really do think the Uprising could be the worst team in the league. Number 19, the Los Angeles Valiant. Yeah, saying that one out loud is painful, I'm not going to lie, but sometimes the truth has to be told no matter how much it hurts. The Valiant stink. Let's call it how it is. This franchise completely dismantled what they were working with and replaced it with a bunch of unproven rookies. Dividing by Zero put it the best way I could possibly think of in his own power rankings video he made last week. The Valiant, as he says, are a roster that screams, we don't want to spend money on player contracts this season. And it's true. Why else would they have traded away their star players and their supporting cast? There's no way around it. The Valiant decided to go full budget mode, and their performance in 2020 will definitely reflect that. I'm sure some of you are going to ask why I put the Valiant over the Uprising, which is a fair question, but first off, I want to say that these two are pretty interchangeable. In my opinion, they are probably the only teams in the league who have very little chance of even finishing in the top 12. They're both awful. But what makes me give the slight edge to the Valiant is their DPS. I'll take the Valiant DPS line of KSP, Shax, Apply, and KSF over Color Hex, Jerry, and Munchkin any day of the week. They're more skilled and the potential is just higher in my opinion. I also feel this Valiant team just has better chemistry. From what I've seen on social media, a lot of these guys seem pretty close with one another. A team where the guys are really close with each other usually results in a far better environment. It's more friendly and you're less likely to see fights or people pointing fingers at one particular person for the problem. Between the DPS and the chemistry, I believe the Valiant have a visible advantage over Boston. However, it's not a big one, and I can totally see the Valiant coming in last place instead. After all, this team is really bad, hence why they fall into the number 19 spot. Number 18, the Paris Eternal. Paris is kind of in a sad state if I'm going to be honest. They were very busy over the offseason with all the upgrades they made, and yet I still can't find it in my heart to trust them. Unlike Boston or the Valiant, they do have some star power present. Soon has always been great, and I think the likes of Sparkle and maybe even Hanbin have a chance to be something special. Not to mention that their coaching staff is very promising. But even so, this team is just lacking. There's no other way to put it. As it currently stands, I have 3 main problems with the Paris Eternal. The first of which is the main tank position. I don't think I need to explain myself with Ben Best. He really isn't any good. And although Nosmite will be an upgrade, how much will he actually help? Like I've said in previous videos, I think that Nosmite definitely does deserve another chance at the Overwatch League level since he was competing with Gushue for playtime last year. But the thing is, I just don't see him being anything more than average. Every time I watch Nosmite, I never find myself feeling impressed. And if Paris wants any chance of making the playoffs, then average just won't cut it. Issue number 2 for me lies within flex support. Some people will disagree with me here, but Hip and Gray are nothing special. They both have shown flashes here and there, but it never lasts seemingly, and in a league where every game is important, consistency is key. You have to show up when it matters, and I don't believe Hip or Gray is capable of doing this often. And finally, problem number 3 for me is how this team plans to survive without Sparkle. Your star flex DPS isn't available until the end of May. So how on earth does Paris plan to address this? Are you going to start Nico, or do you have something else in mind? Either way, I don't like their flex DPS situation very much until Sparkle gets there. Life without him could prove to be quite difficult, and when you factor in the other problems I have with Paris, it becomes pretty clear why I don't think very highly of them heading into 2020. Coming in at the 17th place spot is the London Spitfire, and I'll just say it right off the bat. I think London is better than some people are giving them credit for. I wouldn't go as far as saying they're serious contenders or anything, but I feel they could really surprise some people and maybe even sneak into the plans if things fall in their favor. But that is going to require a lot of good things to happen and probably some luck as well. They're ranked 17th for a reason after all. There's plenty of challenges for them to overcome. The primary one is developing their young and inexperienced roster. No player on this team has proved themselves yet. Since London took the Valiant approach of trading away all of their big stars and signing players for cheap, the coaching staff is facing a lot of pressure here. If they can't groom at least a handful of these young players into reliable playmakers, then the Spitfire stand no chance of finishing top 12 or higher. There's no way this team is relevant even if somebody like Krillin and or Glister turns out to be a star. They need more. But unfortunately, I just don't know how much more this roster has to offer. Some of their guys have little experience in contenders, and some have none at all. Sometimes these players do pan out, I will admit that, like with Fitz from the Dynasty for example. But even so, it's still a big gamble, especially when you're taking on so many of these young players at once, and you can't focus on just developing like 1 or 2 of them. When I look at London, I see a team of mystery. Their future is very uncertain, and I feel there's a lot more that can go wrong than there is right. I want to believe in this London team, but right now it's just too risky. They have their work cut out for them if they want me to acknowledge them. Number 16, the Dallas Fuel. Try as they might, the Fuel appear to be in a worse position than last year despite the positive changes they made. It's not that the Fuel necessarily got worse over the offseason, it's more that most of the league has just gotten stronger. But even so, the Fuel definitely are in a position to possibly finish in like the top 12, I feel. Every team from here on out is in that position. This also includes London, I guess. But looking at the Fuel specifically, I like the additions of Guangzhou, Doha, and Decay. I feel these guys could be serious difference makers. Guangzhou has the leadership and consistency going for him, and I think both Doha and Decay could form a potential all-star caliber DPS line if they progress and feel comfortable on their new team. But unfortunately, that's only one half of a potential starting lineup. The other half doesn't look nearly as promising. Although Note will have fantastic synergy with Guangzhou, no doubt, I don't know if I believe he's capable of playing well from an individual standpoint. My main issue with Note that makes me say this is the lack of flexibility. If the meta doesn't call for Diva, then Note could be a major weakness. And even if it does, there's going to be times where he won't be able to play Diva if she has a high pick rate due to the hero pool thing coming out. So now he really just has to find a way to flex, and I don't know if I trust him to do that. As for Unko and Closer, well, they're alright. I think of the two of them as average. They won't always suck, but they're not going to dominate a ton either. My concerns at support are the same as Paris basically. Players who are usually mediocre just simply will not cut it if you're trying to make the playoffs. But unlike Paris, the Fuel don't even have a ton of options. So if Unko or Closer suck, then they're pretty much stuck with them unless Harry Hook can do any better. And what about the rest of the bench? Do you really trust Zachary, AKM, or Trill to pick up the slack if one of your starters play poorly? I know I certainly don't. Still don't know how much I believe in Arrow as a coach either. Dallas is in a very similar situation to London, I feel. They have a ton of upside, but it kind of feels like the chances of stuff going wrong is just a lot higher. I'd be more than willing to bump this team up in the rankings if they prove me wrong, but until then, this is where they'll stay. Number 15, the Toronto Defiant. Toronto's one of those teams that I can see either being much better than I anticipated or a lot worse. Their potential ranges that greatly, and that's mostly because there are factors that could really dictate this team's future. The big one I tend to think of is their new main tank, Beast. Back before Fusion University played in Korea, he was one of the better American main tanks in the game. But after getting dominated in Korean contenders recently, the perception on him has changed a bit, and now we're at the point where we don't know if it's okay to have faith in him anymore. I don't know if he has what it takes to be a starting caliber main tank in the Overwatch League, and with him currently being the only player on Toronto at main tank, this is a monumental risk. If he can't hold his own, then this team will likely crumble. The other factor on my mind with this team has to do with consistency. The Defiant signed a bunch of players with a ton of ups and downs throughout their career. This especially goes for the likes of the DPS and Kelix. None of these guys are bad players. I would say all of them are decent or pretty good. The problem is they don't always show it, and as a result, they make dumb mistakes or find themselves getting outplayed by the opposition. If the Toronto players can limit this issue and Beast is good enough on stage, then I see a world where this team is in the running for the playoffs. But if things go wrong, this team could suck. If I'm a Toronto fan, I'm really banking on NYXL to help out Beast and for this coaching staff to whip these players into more consistent playmakers. Toronto is definitely a team worth giving your attention to this year. Number 14, the Houston Outlaws. I won't lie, the Outlaws might be one of the hardest teams to judge, and looking at community predictions, it's clear there's no common consensus on where this team will finish. I've seen some say they're going to be bottom 3, while others are insisting they're top 12. It's difficult to get a grasp on just how good the Outlaws truly are. In my personal opinion, they're middle of the pack. Houston made some notable upgrades that put them in the conversation as a potential playoff team. But once again, it's important to remember that so many other teams in this league made good strides during the offseason as well, so the competition will be fierce. The Outlaws have some things going for them that make me think they could be a capable team, and some of those things are the upgrades they made at support, off-tank, and the coaching staff, as well as their easier strength of schedule thanks to them playing in the Atlantic Conference. And with guys like Meko and even Hydration now on the roster, I think it's more likely that Houston can be in a situation where they don't just have to depend on Dante all the time to make the plays or bail them out of tough situations. But even so, there's still a few reasons that I worry about the Outlaws. Besides not being quite as good on paper as some of the other teams in the league, I think it's also worth mentioning there is a possibility that Meko, Jexay, and Repel fail on a Western team. None of them have any prior experience playing for an English-speaking roster. They all have to get used to it and hope it doesn't hinder their ability to properly communicate and or perform on stage. Also, with Jake now gone and Ruckus likely heading to the bench, who will step up and be the leader this team needs? As much as I like the new and improved Houston Outlaws, I get this feeling they're still not good enough. Number 13. The Florida Mayhem. In a shocking turn of events, the Mayhem appear to not be complete and utter trash anymore, and unlike some of the other teams in the league, they made very little moves during the offseason to put them in such a favorable position. All they did was sign 2 coaches and 2 players, and yet I find myself thinking very highly of what Florida has become. And I mean, can you really blame me? They finished 2019 on the right foot with a pretty decent stage 4, and I believe they're about to carry that momentum into season 3. I have a lot of trust in Saya Player and Fate, and when you pair them up with Yaki, Gangnam Jin, and a better coaching staff, you have a fairly promising team on paper. I have no doubt in my mind this will by far be the best team Florida has ever made, but there still are a few questions I have about them that keep me from placing them any higher. One is that I still believe Gargoyle has to prove himself. It's true he played well in Stage 4, but that was primarily on Roadhog. If he can perform this way in a different meta, then he'll earn my trust. The other main gripe I have with Florida is Chris. I don't know how I feel about him being the only main support on the roster currently. I've heard that Chris is crucial for the Mayhem in the comms, so perhaps he keeps the team together, but what I see in game from him leaves a lot to be desired. He reminds me almost of a worse version of Custa. I'm hoping that'll play better since the team around him is stronger and all, but as of this moment, I just don't believe in him. Florida as a team is strong, but they still have those burning questions that keep me from wanting to put them in the top 12. Number 12. The Chengdu Hunters. This is like the consensus pick that many analysts seem to agree with me on. Like myself, many of them believe the Hunters to be top 12, or at least on the cusp of it. There's 2 common arguments as to why people think the Hunters won't be top 12 though. One is that they will struggle to find wins since teams will now have their chaotic playstyle figured out. The other is that being in the Pacific Conference will severely cripple the amounts of games they can win. While both of those arguments are fair, I disagree with them. I have one word for you that I think counters these arguments. Leave. I'm on the Leave hype train. I've been on it for a while now. He's a monster flex DPS, and I think he's going to answer all the calls for Chengdu's problems. Here's how I see it. The Hunters have suffered big time from consistency issues. This especially goes for their DPS. But Leave tends to perform well in-game, so he offers a potential solution to this. If they play around him, I don't even think the Hunters will need to constantly play off-meta comps. And with them adding a new main tank, the team won't have to feel as pressured to only play around Among's Wrecking Ball if he's not meta. I don't think there's a single bad player on this team. Everybody's average or better. If the Hunters figure it out, then they will probably perform above my expectations. And I think it's also worth pointing out that this new hero pool thing will probably promote a more chaotic style, and the Hunters love that type of stuff. They love coming up with the innovative strategies, so that might really suit them well. Now it's just all about working on the consistency, and I'm not 100% certain they'll figure this out, even if I do feel confident in them. Number 11. The Washington Justice. How the mighty have risen. All my teams from the bottom 3 at the beginning of last year find themselves being placed all in a row yet again, but this time they're in contention to make the playoffs. It's amazing what a year of time can do for you. The Justice, let's call it how it is, are straight up a pretty good team though. And at the center of it is Corey, who I think could be in the running to win the regular season MVP award this year. He's the type of guy who will win you a few games just by himself. He is that good. And along with him, you have his buddy Stratus, as well as a sick support duo of Arc and Aim God. Those four in a starting lineup sounds really nice. I expect the Justice to be competitive, and I think they'll win a good amount of games. But what keeps me from considering them contenders is the tank line. It's not that I don't like Roar, Lulcich, and Elivote, it's more that I don't rate them highly as of this recording. Roar left a lot to be desired as the starter for the Gladiators last year, and both Lulcich and Elivote have yet to play a single game on the Overwatch League stage. Because I don't know what to expect from these guys, I'm a little concerned they could end up being a potential weakness that holds the Justice back from true contender status. If the tanks do prove to be serviceable though, then I think this team ends up being solid. But presently speaking, I see them as a potential liability, and that keeps me from rating the Justice as highly as I could have. Alright, time for the upper half of the rankings, and kicking it off at the number 10 spot is the Los Angeles Gladiators. I know a lot of people are high on the Gladiators this year, but I just don't see it. Don't get me wrong, this team should be good. They certainly have the pieces needed to post a decent record, but they just don't impress me enough. At their best, I think they could make the playoffs through the play-in tournament. In my opinion, this team lives and dies by the DPS. They will be the deciding factor that dictates how far this team can go. They've got 2 rookies and Bird Ring to work with. I'm thinking that maybe either Mirror or Jaro could be pretty good, but nothing is guaranteed obviously, and Bird Ring could certainly end up being a project. Can Deepay and the coaching staff help him more often than not play at his peak? And will Bird Ring be able to keep a level head that keeps him from quitting on his team? Those questions are just really difficult to answer. If it's hard to decide whether a player is reliable or just a liability, then there's a good reason to feel concerned about him and the team he plays for. Like I said earlier though, even if there are problems with the DPS, I think the Gladiators overall are still a relatively strong team. If OG looks more like the player from the first half of 2019, then him and Space will make for a solid tank line, and the consistent support line of Big Goose and Shaz has always been one you can rely on. And as a bonus, I think the coaching staff is great. The best way for me to describe this Gladiators team is by saying that they're good, but not quite at the level of great. Number 9. The Seoul Dynasty. So after a strong offseason that saw them acquire some serious star power, the Dynasty look like they're in prime position to once again qualify for the playoffs. When I look at this roster from top to bottom, I see a talented group of guys with the potential to do something special. Their tank line is loaded, and they have profit on DPS. Not to mention, they made some needed changes with their coaching staff. What else could you ask for? On paper, things look great. They have well-established players, and some other people who have promise, like Fitz, Creative, and Illicit. But when I look at the Seoul Dynasty in their current state, I just don't know if it's enough. I want to believe it is, since they have a ton of players I really like, but I'm still not entirely convinced. The big issue with Seoul last year was in the consistency department. Sometimes they looked like a good team, and at other moments they were a bad team. Perhaps changing up the coaching and shaking up the roster is a solution to this, but right now, I just don't think it is. As good as Prophet, Gesture, and Badoshan are, they've had previous performance issues on a different team, and I fear that could carry over onto Seoul at least a little bit. I'm also worried over the Jaehong and Zumba departures. These were 2 of the guys that held the Dynasty together. Somebody else has to step up into that role now, and I just don't know if anybody on the current roster is capable of this. Lack of leadership could really hurt this team down the stretch, and with half of the starting lineup potentially consisting of London players, the team could end up divided if there's any sort of internal struggle. Seoul makes a strong case as playoff contenders. If this team figures it out, then they will be dangerous, but as of right now, I just don't feel that confident in them. Number 8, the Hangzhou Spark. I've seen a handful of people underrate these guys. The main concerns have to do with them making very few additions to the roster and then playing in a tough division, which in all honesty are fair arguments. My question to the people who think this way though is, why does it matter? It's true that the Spark probably should have made a few other signings to further bolster the strength of this team, but why make significant changes to something that is already rather strong? The Spark were a damn good team last year, and I have no reason to believe that won't continue into 2020. They have a solid starting lineup. They still have their superstar main tank Gushwei, and he'll likely be more comfortable than he ever has before playing under this team environment, and complementing him with Rhea should continue to work well. I'm also very excited to see Godspeed, IDK, and Bebe in particular, as I believe they had a ton of bright spots as rookies last year, and I think they're going to continue to get better and better as the 2020 season progresses. Also, I think picking up a new promising support line out of China will only strengthen the Spark even further. My one knock on the Spark though is that they're lacking backups. Bozzy is only on a 2-way contract, so there's no way he could be a serious backup for Godspeed and Adora, and with Gushue, he currently has no backup under him at all, so he won't be taking any breaks. Burnout could play a strong role in 2020, so having backups on hand is crucial in my opinion. You need to ensure the well-being of your players. Hopefully the Spark acquire some backups eventually, otherwise things could end up getting ugly. Number 7, the Guangzhou Charge. I'll just straight up say it. I love the Charge this year. Their young core is more experienced and more talented than ever before. Maintaining pretty much everybody who helped this team be successful last year is great. Nero, Shu, Happy, and Eileen in particular are people I am extremely excited to watch this year as I think they will dominate the competition. And as a bonus, you still do have Rio and your team captain Chara. While I don't think either of these guys are amazing, they certainly are dependable. They won't stand out a ton, but they're not going to really throw your games either. All those guys alone make for a scary team, but adding a veteran like Neptuno plus a few promising rookies in Krong and Waya only makes this team even more terrifying. Neptuno's going to help this young team out a ton, and he offers an aggressive playmaker type of style. I've also heard some really good things about both Krong and Waya and how they could become key contributors someday. The Charge are very much in the running to make the playoffs. They have everything they need to succeed. There's two things that I think hold the Charge back though. One is the loss of Hoppa, who I think was a very important member of last year's team thanks to his flexibility and reliability. The other is that I simply don't think they match some of the other teams I have ahead of them in the rankings. No disrespect to the Charge, I think they're great, but I don't quite think they're ready to be called title contenders just yet. Number 6, the Vancouver Titans. Not gonna lie, it feels weird placing a team of this caliber this far down. But after the way things have gone down over the last couple of months, I'm left with no other choice. Theoretically, there is a world where this team succeeds and plays at the level we all know they can, but the chances of this all blowing up in their faces is fairly high. Getting rid of Bumper, who has been with guys like Hoxel and Stitch since 2016, is a huge loss. I know it's up for debate on where Bumper ranks among main tanks in the league, but it goes without saying that he was a very valuable asset when it comes to being a team leader. Getting rid of him plus TZ then signing Fissure is a giant gamble. Everywhere Fissure goes, trouble seems to follow. The guys get to play a full season for a single team. Let's call it how it is. Fissure has an ego. He likes to call the shots and he likes to be the one in charge. Because he likes to have so much of the power, things could quickly turn out for the worse if he doesn't get what he wants. And who's to say that he doesn't get bored again like he did on Seoul last year? If something goes wrong, then what's your plan B? You don't have a backup right now, so you're kind of screwed. Fissure is a bizarre choice, but I can realistically see it working out since Fissure is arguably more skilled than both Bumper and TZ, and he does have that aggressive playstyle that the team is already used to playing around. And at one point, Fissure was the best main tank in the world. We all know he's capable of true greatness. It all comes down to whether or not he can stay in the right place mentally and not cause problems for the rest of his team. If he can stay out of trouble and be a good teammate, then maybe this pays off. After all, this roster is relatively strong, with the only potential weakness being at hitscan DPS. The Vancouver Titans are yet another one of those Overwatch League teams that could end up being a lot worse or a lot better than you expect. Inner turmoil and taking a risk with Fissure are serious factors that could end up leading to this team's downfall, and it really only takes one thing going wrong for the season to quickly turn into a disaster, but at the same time, if the Titans stay on the right track, then they will be very good. I have faith that Vancouver could be a solid Overwatch League team, but I had to be cautious with their placement since they have such little margin for error. Number 5, the Shanghai Dragons. This is one of those teams I found myself feeling more and more confident about as this offseason progressed. At first I thought they were maybe like top 8, but now I'm at the point where I think of them as borderline title contenders. I'm a little worried about leadership now that Gamsu is gone and maybe Coach Moon potentially making some dumb mistakes, but that's all I can really complain about. A combination of established players and big-name rookies have the Dragons in a position to do something special. I'm a big fan of the way this team is set up. They have good starters and a lot of backups. This is how a team was meant to be built for this kind of season. There's good potential with rotations, and there's no need to feel concerned over burnout either. And they've got star power too. Fleta in particular gives the Dragons that needed versatility they were lacking at DPS last year, and I think he'll be a super valuable asset, especially while Diem is unavailable to play thanks to some health issues he's dealing with. And let's not forget they still have Ding as well. Also, I think some people are sleeping on the likes of Void, Lee Jae-gong, and either Izayaki or Luffy depending on who gets the start. I'm expecting all of these guys to be solid. The one thing you could maybe get on the Dragons for is main tank, but I have the mindset that the Dragons will figure that out. Look out for Shanghai, folks. They're no joke. Number 4, the Philadelphia Fusion. I know my Fusion doubters are going to be screaming at me for this placement, but I'm giving into temptation. I honestly believe the Fusion have built themselves a pretty legit roster this year. The offseason acquisitions are really nice. Alarm, Funny Astro, and Fury will make this team better. I have a lot of faith in the three of those guys to help turn the Fusion back into the competitors they once were. And I know Carpe's coming off a not so great second year, but I believe he's about to turn it all around in 2020. And even if he does struggle still, I think their new rookie Hitsuke Hisu could serve as a solution for that, and the same could be said with EQO. I think he's due for a bounce back year, but if not, there's always Ivy, who could be a lot better than some fans think. The only thing that scares me with the Fusion is Sato. The Fusion are still putting so much of their faith in him, and that could end up being a huge mistake if we see a repeat of what happened in 2019. The good news for Sato though is that he probably won't be playing nearly as much Rein, which is the one hero he was really bad on. Sato doesn't have to be great. There's so much star power surrounding him. I see it like this. All he has to do is hold his own or have his weaknesses get covered up by his teammates, and he should do just fine. Like with Shanghai, the Fusion are borderline title contenders in my opinion. Against most teams in the league, Sato probably won't be an issue. But I do have this feeling he'll get exploited whenever the Fusion play against any team of elite status. But even so, the Fusion have done a great job retooling, and I'm looking forward to seeing what they could accomplish. Number 3, the Atlanta Reign. Now this is where we enter true elite territory. Atlanta is loaded everywhere you can think of. They have 4 good tank players, 4 good supports, and most importantly, Atlanta has assembled what could be a god squad at DPS. You have who in my opinion is a top 3 flex DPS in the league with Erster, and you're pairing him up with either one of your rookie hit scans or Baby Bay. This Atlanta team is very, very dangerous. If either Edison or Sharp play at a high level, then the Reign are without a doubt one of the most talented teams in the Overwatch League by far. And other than skill, you have to like the different personalities this team has assembled. They have their hype man, they've got leadership, and just a chill group of guys who probably won't cause problems. In my eyes, the Atlanta Reign are title contenders. They possess everything needed to succeed, and I'm expecting them to win a ton of games. Number 2, the NYXL. New York is pretty used to being title contenders, then coming up short. But I honestly think this year could be different. And the reason I say that is because of the major changes they made. Their new head coach IMT pushed the NYXL to change their playstyle during the playoffs, and with the additions of Hoppa, Who Are You, and Mandu, this new and more aggressive playstyle is likely to make a return. With the exception of Meko, who joined the Outlaws, they'll be joining a solid core that has not changed much compared to last year. The NYXL boast one of the most talented rosters in the league once again, and I believe they'll be a completely different team this year, which I mean in the best way possible. Their talent and different philosophy on how to play the game should give just about any other team in the league a real challenge. I'm not trying to guarantee anything here, but this finally might be the NYXL's year. And finally, my number 1 spot belongs to none other than the San Francisco Shock. Yes, I know, so crazy, right? Who could have seen this coming? What an epic plot twist. But in all seriousness, what else can I say besides, the Shock are the defending champs? And yeah, I know I said a similar thing with London at the beginning of last year, but this Shock team feels far different. Unlike the Spitfire, the Shock have shown the ability to constantly be consistent. Not only that, but they're simply more talented with a more reliable coaching staff. And because of how deep their roster is, the Shock can deal with any situation. When you have a top tier player at every position, you don't have to worry about struggling with a specific meta. And because these guys are so flexible, the newly added hero pools will not be a problem either. The Shock are just too powerful. They're equipped to get through anything that comes their way. I really have no other choice but to put them at number 1. They're still the team to beat. There's currently no visible weakness to exploit. Everything about them screams domination and future dynasty. They have the reigning MVP Sinatra. They have the superstar off-tank Choyobin, who are both in the running for best player in the world. The Shock are just way too good to not succeed. This team is perfect in pretty much every way imaginable, which is exactly why they landed at the number 1 spot on my list. And there you go. Those are my 2020 preseason power rankings. I'm going to put the entire thing up on the screen so you get a basic overview, and I'll even throw up my preseason rankings from last year to compare how much things have changed. Now that hero pools will be a thing starting in March, things could get quite interesting and chaotic. Teams who don't have a ton of flexibility could suffer greatly, while teams such as the Shock or maybe the Reign could thrive because of it. This season is going to be a ton of fun, and I can't wait to enjoy it alongside the rest of you guys. But yeah, that's pretty much it from me, so now I turn things over to you. What do you think of my power rankings? Let me know down in the comment section, and feel free to list off your own as well. Also, if you enjoyed this content, then be sure to like and subscribe if you want to see more. And you can also further support me by following me on Twitter, joining my Discord, and becoming a channel member. Special thanks goes out to my Tier 2 members for their extra support, as well as all of you who watched the video until the very end. Thanks as always for the love and support, and until next time, this is ATP, signing out. Peace.